My name is Mason Mitchell, 32 years old, and I never thought my own family would throw me out of the house I was paying for. Years of carrying their financial burden had worn me down. But nothing prepared me for finding my belongings in trash bags on the lawn. The suburban home where my parents, sister Tina, and her husband Kevin lived had become my greatest source of stress. All because I suggested they downsize their lifestyle if they wanted me to keep paying their mortgage. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt taken advantage of by loved ones. Trust me, you'll want to see how I handled this betrayal. I grew up in what I'd call a typical middle-class American family. My parents, Philip and Diane Mitchell, worked hard to provide for my sister Tina and me. Dad was a sales manager at a local furniture store, and Mom taught 4th grade at the elementary school down the street. We weren't rich by any means, but we never went without the necessities. Family vacations were modest camping trips or visiting relatives, and Christmas was always reasonable but never extravagant. Things started changing when I was in high school. Dad's furniture store was bought by a larger company, and during the restructuring, he was laid off after 23 years of service. His severance package was decent, but at 52. Finding comparable employment proved nearly impossible in our small town. Mom's teaching salary kept us afloat. But the financial strain was evident in the constant whispered arguments I'd overhear late at night. Despite our financial challenges, I managed to secure a partial scholarship to State University. It wasn't enough to cover everything, so I worked 20 to 30 hours weekly at the campus computer lab and local pizza place. Those 4 years were a blur of classes, work shifts, and occasional power naps. While other students were partying, I was debugging code until 3 a.m. for extra credit or delivering pepperoni pizzas in the rain. The hard work paid off when I landed a junior developer position at TechSphere, a growing software company in the city. My starting salary wasn't spectacular, but it was more money than I'd ever seen. Around this same time, my parents faced another setback. The bank was threatening foreclosure on our family home after months of missed payments. Mom called me in tears, and without hesitation, I transferred my entire first bonus to help them catch up. That was 8 years ago. What began as temporary assistance morphed into a permanent arrangement. As my career advanced and my salary increased, so did my family's expectations and spending habits. My father, rather than seeking new employment, decided at 55 that he was essentially retired. He joined the Oakwood Country Club using my credit card, claiming the networking opportunities would lead to consulting work that never materialized. His garage filled with expensive fishing gear, golf clubs, and woodworking tools for hobbies he pursued with passion but never attempted to monetize. Mom had retired from teaching earlier than planned, citing stress and exhaustion. I understood she deserved rest after decades in education, but soon she was scheduling weekly spa treatments, joining a pricey wine club, and refreshing her wardrobe with designer labels. When questioned, she'd simply say, "I raised you kids for 20 years, don't I deserve some luxury now?" My sister Tina had always been the family princess. Despite having a degree in marketing, she bounced between entry-level jobs, never staying more than a few months before quitting over toxic workplace dynamics or ethical disagreements with management. 2 years ago, she married Kevin, an aspiring entrepreneur whose business ideas ranged from cryptocurrency trading to importing exotic pets. Neither contributed meaningfully to the household expenses. Yet Tina drove a BMW I was making payments on, claiming she needed to project success for job interviews. Kevin was perhaps the most frustrating. A charming guy with an endless supply of get-rich-quick schemes, he'd approach me monthly with investment opportunities requiring just $5,000 to get started. When I declined, he'd act wounded, suggesting I didn't believe in family or support his dreams. Meanwhile, he spent his days playing video games or attending networking events that mysteriously always took place at sports bars during major games. As the sole financial provider, my life became increasingly restricted. I worked 60-hour weeks at my primary job, took weekend consulting projects, and even taught a night course at the local community college. My own dreams, buying a home, traveling, maybe eventually starting a family, were perpetually postponed. My small apartment was just a place to sleep between work shifts. Dating was nearly impossible. How could I explain to potential partners that most of my income supported 4 fully capable adults? The worst part was the growing sense of entitlement, rather than gratitude. I received complaints when payments were even slightly delayed. "The housekeeper couldn't come yesterday because your transfer was late," Mom would text. As if employing domestic help was a necessity rather than a luxury. Dad would forward me bills with just a question mark as the subject line. Tina once called me at work, furious because I'd questioned a $900 hair styling and coloring session on the credit card I'd given her. For emergencies only. My physical and mental health deteriorated under the constant pressure. I developed insomnia, grinding my teeth so badly I cracked a molar. My doctor warned about my elevated blood pressure and stress levels. Friends stopped inviting me to gatherings since I always declined. Unable to afford both social activities and my family's lifestyle. The few times I mentioned needing to cut back on expenses, I was made to feel selfish and told that family takes care of family. By my 32nd birthday, I was burning out completely. I'd postponed my own life for nearly a decade, watching my youth slip away while enabling my family's increasingly extravagant lifestyle. Something had to give, and unfortunately, that something turned out to be me. The email from my father arrived on a Tuesday evening as I was wrapping up a marathon coding session. The subject line read, "Urgent, home improvement needs." I sighed, already knowing what would follow. The message detailed critical renovations required for the house, a kitchen remodel, master bathroom upgrade, and backyard landscaping including a water feature. The total came to just over $15,000, which Dad expected me to provide within the week since the contractors were already scheduled to start. I stared at my computer screen, a strange calm replacing my usual anxiety. This wasn't an emergency repair like a leaking roof or broken furnace. These were luxury upgrades to a house I paid for but never enjoyed. I closed my laptop without responding and, for the first time in years, left work at a reasonable hour. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake cataloging the sacrifices I'd made. The relationship with Sarah that ended because I couldn't afford to join her on a vacation. The persistent pain in my lower back from the cheap mattress in my Spartan apartment. The retirement account I'd had to borrow against twice to cover my family's emergencies. I realized I'd become an ATM rather than a son and brother. The next morning, I called my longtime friend Ryan for coffee. We'd been roommates in college, and unlike most of my friends, he'd stuck around despite my perpetual unavailability. Over espressos that cost more than I typically allowed myself, I unloaded the whole situation. "Mason, this isn't sustainable," Ryan said bluntly. "You're being exploited by the people who should care about you most. Their family," I replied automatically, the justification I'd repeated for years. "Family supports each other." He countered. "This isn't support, it's parasitic. When was the last time any of them asked how you were doing? Whether you needed anything?" I couldn't remember. "Look," Ryan continued, "I manage accounts for a living. Bring me their expenses, and let's see what we're really dealing with." That weekend I gathered every financial record I could access, credit card statements I paid, utility bills, property tax assessments, insurance documents. Ryan helped me organize everything into spreadsheets, and the picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. The monthly mortgage payment on the 4-bedroom suburban house was $2,300, reasonable for the area but a significant percentage of even my solid income. But the discretionary spending was staggering. Dad's country club membership cost $750 monthly plus incidentals that often doubled that amount. Mom's self-care expenses averaged $1.200 monthly between spa treatments, hair appointments, and shopping. Tina and Kevin somehow managed to spend over $2,000 monthly on restaurants, bars, and entertainment. Despite claiming they were carefully budgeting, Ryan whistled as we totaled the numbers. Mason, you're spending over $8,000 monthly supporting their lifestyle. Not including random large expenses like this renovation or the 3 vacations they took last year. 3 vacations? I asked, confused. I only knew about the trip to Florida. Ryan pointed at the credit card statements. Ski weekend in February, beach week in June, and a wine country tour in September. I felt physically ill. While I'd worked through the holidays to meet project deadlines, my family had been enjoying getaways I couldn't afford for myself. You need to stop this, Ryan said gently. Not just for your financial health, but for your actual health. And honestly, for them too. You're enabling behavior that isn't sustainable or healthy for anyone. That night, I created a new spreadsheet, a reasonable budget that would cover the mortgage and essential expenses while eliminating the excessive luxuries. I researched affordable alternatives to their current spending, a public golf course membership instead of the country club, a family phone plan rather than individual premium accounts, 1 sensible car instead of 3 luxury vehicles. The new budget would still require my support, but at a level that wouldn't continue destroying my life. I spent hours refining the numbers, practicing what I'd say, even writing a script for myself. I wanted to approach this compassionately but firmly. These were reasonable changes that many families lived with happily. We could make this work if everyone contributed. I scheduled a family meeting for Sunday dinner, asking everyone to be present for an important discussion. My message was met with curious responses. Dad assumed I was announcing a promotion, Mom wondered if I was finally introducing a girlfriend. And Tina just sent an eye-rolling emoji asking if this could be quick because she had plans later. Saturday night before the meeting, I barely slept. I rehearsed my talking points, anticipated objections, and reminded myself that this intervention came from a place of love, both for them and for myself. I truly believe that with some adjustments and shared responsibility, we could create a healthier dynamic for everyone. Looking back now, my optimism seems almost painfully naive. Sunday evening arrived with perfect weather. The kind of clear spring day that normally lifts spirits. I arrived at the family home early, setting up my laptop and printouts at the dining room table. Mom had prepared her signature pot roast, a meal she knew I loved, which only added to my guilt about the difficult conversation ahead. There's my financial wizard, Dad greeted me with a hearty slap on the back. How's work? That new project still keeping you busy? It's fine, Dad, I replied, noticing he didn't actually wait for my answer before pouring himself a generous glass of the expensive scotch I'd given him for Christmas, a gift that had stretched my credit card to the limit. Tina and Kevin arrived 20 minutes late, as usual. Tina was showcasing a dramatic new haircut and designer outfit I undoubtedly would find on next month's credit card statement. Kevin immediately headed for the liquor cabinet, mixing himself a cocktail while loudly recounting his latest networking success. You wouldn't believe who I met at Watershed yesterday, he announced to no one in particular. The VP of that new tech startup downtown. We really hit it off. He's definitely going to call me about their marketing strategy. I nodded politely. Having heard variations of this story dozens of times without any actual job offers materializing. Mom called us to dinner, and the familiar family ritual unfolded. Dad complained about the neighbor's dog. Mom recounted gossip from her book club. Tina scrolled through her phone while occasionally interjecting with celebrity news, and Kevin dominated the conversation with grandiose plans and name-dropping. Not once did anyone ask about my week or how I was doing. After dinner, as Mom brought out coffee and dessert, I cleared my throat. So, I wanted to talk to everyone about something important. Is it a promotion? Dad asked immediately. Because we've been thinking about replacing the deck since summer's coming. Actually, no. I said, my prepared introduction already derailed. It's about our financial situation. The current arrangement isn't sustainable. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Mom's smile faltered, Dad straightened in his chair. Tina finally put down her phone, and Kevin suddenly found the dessert fascinating. What do you mean, sweetie? Mom asked cautiously. Is there a problem at work? The problem isn't at work. I explained, opening my laptop to display the budget spreadsheets. The problem is that I'm spending over $8,000 a month supporting this household, which is more than 70% of my after-tax income. I can't continue at this level. Dad frowned, his expression darkening. You make six figures. Where's all your money going if not to your family? The question stung with its inherent entitlement. To my family is exactly where it's going, Dad. That's the point. I have almost nothing left from my own life. My apartment is barely furnished. I haven't taken a vacation in years. I'm not saving adequately for retirement, and I've got nothing in emergency savings. So what are you saying? Tina interjected, her tone already defensive. You're cutting us off? After everything Mom and Dad did for you? I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stick to my plan. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm proposing a more sustainable arrangement. I turned my laptop around, showing the detailed budget I'd created. This plan covers the mortgage, utilities, reasonable food expenses, and one family car. It eliminates the country club membership, luxury vehicles, premium entertainment packages, and excessive discretionary spending. The silence that followed was brief but heavy, quickly replaced by a cacophony of objections. Cancel my club membership? Dad exploded. I've built relationships there. That's how men my age network. One car for 4 adults? Mom added incredulously. That's completely impractical. Tina was already in tears. You've always been jealous of me. You just want to control everyone. Kevin, surprisingly, remained silent, though his expression shifted between calculation and concern. I tried to redirect the conversation. Please look at the numbers. This isn't about control or jealousy. It's simple math. I've supported everyone for 8 years without complaint, but I can't do it at this level anymore. I'm burning out. So get a better job. Dad snapped. Or ask for a raise. Don't punish your family because you're underperforming at work. The unfairness of this statement hit me like a physical blow. I've been promoted 3 times in 8 years. I teach night classes and do weekend consulting. I'm working myself to exhaustion. We never asked you to do that, Mom said softly, employing the guilt tactic that had always worked before. We would have been fine with less. We just accepted what you offered. That's not true, I countered, pulling out the email from Dad requesting $15,000 for renovations. This isn't offering. This is demanding. And it's not an isolated incident. I proceeded to outline the history of financial requests, Tina's car, Kevin's business investments, Dad's hobbies, Mom's luxury purchases. With each example, the room grew tenser. So your alternative is what? Dad finally asked. We all get jobs at McDonald's? I'm 60 years old. There are plenty of part-time opportunities that would help supplement. I worked for 30 years. He interrupted. I deserve retirement. I'm not saying you don't deserve retirement. I clarified. I'm saying we need to adjust expectations. Millions of retirees live comfortable lives without country club memberships and $200 golf clubs. The conversation continued deteriorating as I presented each section of the budget. Mom cried when I suggested canceling her spa membership, claiming her self-care was medically necessary for stress. Tina accused me of trying to ruin her marriage by forcing them into poverty, apparently defined as living like average Americans. Kevin finally spoke up to suggest that instead of cutting expenses, I should invest in his newest venture, a cryptocurrency specifically for pet owners, which would solve everyone's money problems. After nearly 2 hours of circular arguments, emotional manipulation, and outright hostility, I realized we weren't making progress. No one had acknowledged the sacrifices I'd made or recognized the toll it had taken. No one had offered a single concession or alternative solution. "This is the situation," I finally said, my voice firm despite my shaking hands. "I cannot and will not continue funding the current lifestyle. Either we implement a reasonable budget like this one, or you'll need to find another way to pay the mortgage and expenses. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but I'm out of alternatives." "So you're threatening us?" Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "After everything we've done for you." "It's not a threat. It's reality. I've supported this family for 8 years at the expense of my own life. I'm not asking anyone to live in poverty, just within reasonable means." Tina stood abruptly, tears streaking her makeup. "You're so selfish. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad love me more." "This isn't about..." I started, but she was already storming out, Kevin trailing behind after giving me a disappointed headshake. Mom was openly sobbing now. "How could you do this to us? We're your family." Dad simply glared, his expression more disappointed than I'd ever seen. "I think you should leave, Mason. Take some time to reconsider your priorities and your attitude toward family." Exhausted and frustrated, I gathered my laptop and documents. "Please just look at the numbers and think about what I've said. We can make this work if everyone contributes." No one responded. Mom had buried her face in her hands, and Dad had turned away, effectively dismissing me. I walked out the front door, hoping some time and distance would help everyone process the reality of our situation more rationally. I had no idea that I was actually leaving my family home for the last time. The spring evening had turned chilly as I drove away from the house, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. The meeting had gone worse than my most pessimistic projections. I'd anticipated resistance, even anger, but the level of entitlement and emotional manipulation had shocked me. These were adults, not children being denied candy. How had reasonable financial boundaries become such a betrayal in their eyes? I found myself driving aimlessly through the neighborhoods of my childhood. Past Jefferson Elementary, where Mom had taught, and where I'd spent countless afternoons waiting in her classroom while she graded papers. Around Miller Park, where Dad had taught me to catch a baseball, his patience never wavering despite my initial clumsiness. These memories made the evening's rejection even more painful. Eventually, I parked at Riverside, a small public park overlooking the water. This had been my thinking spot as a teenager, where I'd come to process difficult days and make important decisions. The park was nearly empty now, just a few evening joggers and someone walking their dog. I sat on my bench, watching the current move steadily downstream. What exactly was my obligation to family? The question had plagued me for years. Of course, family members should support each other. I believed that fundamentally. But when had support transformed into servitude? When had helping become enabling? The line had blurred long ago, and I'd been too exhausted, too guilt-ridden, to notice. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through photos from recent years. Pictures of family Christmases where I'd arrived late after working overtime and left early to prepare for the next day. Birthday celebrations where I'd provided the gifts but somehow remained on the periphery of the festivities. In nearly every image, I looked tired, my smile not quite reaching my eyes, while my family beamed surrounded by the comforts my work provided. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Ryan. "How'd it go?" he asked immediately. "About as well as a root canal without anesthesia," I replied, attempting humor despite my dejection. "That bad, huh? Want to come over? Alicia made her famous chili, and the game's about to start." The invitation was tempting, but I wasn't good company. "Thanks, But I think I need some alone time. Just processing everything. I get it, Ryan said, his voice concerned. But Mason, remember, you did the right thing. This conversation was long overdue. Maybe, I sighed. But I just torpedoed my relationship with my entire family. Was it worth it? The question is, Ryan countered, was destroying yourself worth maintaining the status quo? Because that's where you were headed, man. After we hung up, I sat for another hour at the park, watching darkness settle over the water. Ryan was right, something had to change. Perhaps after everyone had cooled down, we could revisit the conversation more productively. Maybe they just needed time to adjust to the new reality. It was nearly 10 o'clock when I finally headed back to the house, rehearsing opening lines that might restart the dialogue more constructively. The neighborhood was quiet as I turned onto Maple Street, most windows already dark. From a distance, the house looked normal, porch light on, Dad's car in the driveway alongside Tina's BMW and Kevin's leased Audi. It wasn't until I pulled into the driveway that I noticed something amiss. Several black garbage bags were piled near the garage door, items spilling from one that had toppled over. As I got closer, I recognized my worn Metallica t-shirt from college, the one I slept in when staying over after working late. My stomach dropped as understanding dawned. These weren't trash bags. These were my belongings. Disbelieving, I rushed to the front door, key in hand. It didn't work. The familiar lock had been changed. I tried the back door and the side entrance with the same result. Increasingly desperate, I peered through windows to see the family gathered in the living room, watching a movie as if nothing were amiss. My repeated knocking went ignored, though I saw Dad glance toward the door before deliberately turning up the television volume. Taped to the front door was a handwritten note. Think about your behavior and attitude. Call when you're ready to apologize. Humiliation washed over me as I stood on the porch of the house whose mortgage I paid, literally locked out of the life I'd financed. Neighbors' curtains twitched as I gathered my belongings from the yard, stuffing what I could into my car. Some items were weather damaged from sprinklers, others appeared deliberately broken. My framed engineering degree had a spiderweb crack across the glass. I tried calling each family member, cycling through their numbers repeatedly. All went straight to voicemail. My text messages showed as delivered but remained unanswered. Please let me in so we can talk about this. This isn't fair. At least let me get my things properly. I pay for this house. You can't legally lock me out. I just want to talk. Please. And finally, as anger replaced shock, is this really how you treat someone who's supported you for years? Standing in that driveway, surrounded by hastily packed garbage bags containing the fragments of my life that had been stored at the family home, I experienced a moment of clarity so profound it was almost dizzying. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This was exploitation, plain and simple, and it had been happening for years while I'd made excuses for it. With nowhere else to go at that hour, I drove to a 24-hour supermarket parking lot, reclined my seat, and attempted to sleep. The night passed in fitful bursts of rest interrupted by waves of disbelief, anger, and grief. By morning, I looked as wretched as I felt, unshaven, rumpled, and hollow-eyed. Still, I drove directly to the office, unwilling to add professional failure to my personal disaster. Mason? Are you okay? Leslie, my team lead, stopped abruptly in the hallway, concern evident in her expression. I must have looked worse than I thought in my day-old clothes and with dark circles under my eyes. I'm fine, I responded automatically. Just a rough night. Leslie glanced around the busy office before lowering her voice. My office. 5 minutes. I nodded gratefully, ducking into the restroom to splash water on my face and attempt to tame my disheveled appearance. The man in the mirror looked like a stranger, gaunt, exhausted, defeated. I barely recognized myself. In Leslie's office, the professional facade I'd maintained crumbled embarrassingly fast. I found myself explaining the entire situation, the years of financial support, yesterday's confrontation, and the shocking betrayal of being locked out. "You've been paying their entire mortgage? For years?" Leslie asked incredulously. "While living in that tiny apartment by the train tracks?" I nodded, shame washing over me. It sounded so foolish when stated plainly. "Mason, that's..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "That's not a normal family dynamic. That's exploitation." "Their family," I said weakly, the justification sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Family supports each other," Leslie said firmly. "This sounds entirely one-sided." She tapped her pen against her desk thoughtfully before coming to a decision. "The company keeps an apartment for visiting executives. It's empty for the next 2 weeks. You're staying there while you sort this out." I started to protest, but Leslie held up her hand. "This isn't charity, it's pragmatism. You're leading the Westlake project. I need you functional, not sleeping in your car." The apartment was small but infinitely better than my vehicle, clean, furnished, with a proper bed and shower. After a day of operating on autopilot at work, I collapsed into a dreamless sleep, my body surrendering to exhaustion. The next morning, thinking more clearly, I began organizing a strategic response. This situation required both immediate solutions and long-term planning. I made 3 appointments, with financial advisor Barbara Wells, attorney Michael Ramirez, and my primary care physician for the persistent headaches and insomnia that had plagued me for months. Barbara's office was warmly decorated, but her approach was refreshingly direct. "Mason, I've seen similar situations before, though rarely this extreme. First, we need to separate your finances completely from your family's. Then we'll rebuild your personal financial security." She reviewed my financial entanglements, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Your name is on the mortgage but not on the property deed. That's problematic. You've been making payments on 3 vehicles registered to other people. You have credit cards in your name that they use exclusively. And these loans to family members, do you have any documentation?" I shook my head, the extent of my financial naivety becoming painfully apparent. "Okay," Barbara said, making notes. "We have work to do. First step, freeze all credit cards immediately. Second, document everything you can about past contributions, bank statements, transfer records, anything. Third, stop any automatic payments to accounts you don't personally use." The meeting with attorney Michael was equally sobering. "From a legal perspective, your situation is complicated," he explained. "Without written agreements, these financial contributions could be interpreted as gifts rather than loans. The mortgage is particularly tricky. You're legally responsible for the debt, but have no ownership claim on the property. So I've been paying a mortgage for 8 years with nothing to show for it?" I asked, the injustice burning. "Unfortunately, yes. Moving forward, we can issue formal demand letters for documented loans and potentially pursue civil action, but recovery may be limited." The most difficult task was executing the immediate financial separation. Following Barbara and Michael's advice, I froze all family credit cards, removed my automatic payments for their utilities and subscriptions, and transferred the remaining balance from our shared account to my new, secure account. I documented every step meticulously, preserving records of past contributions and current actions. The response was swift and predictable. My phone exploded with notifications, voicemails, texts, and emails ranging from confused to furious. From Dad: "The credit card was declined at the club. Fix this immediately." From Mom: "The power company called about a missed payment. Is this some kind of mistake?" From Tina: "My card stopped working while I was shopping. I was humiliated at the register. What the hell, Mason?" From Kevin: "Bro, this childish power play isn't cool. Man up and handle your responsibilities." Each message assumed the disruption was temporary, a mistake to be corrected rather than a deliberate boundary being established. None acknowledged the irony of locking me out while expecting continued financial support. The most difficult part was maintaining no contact despite the emotional warfare. Mom left tearful voicemails about needing medication she couldn't afford. Dad sent emails about potential health issues exacerbated by stress. Tina weaponized childhood memories. Remember when I stayed with you in the hospital when you had your appendix out? This is how you repay that loyalty? Their messages triggered waves of guilt, doubt, and longing for simpler times. Dr. Wilson, the therapist I started seeing, helped me recognize these reactions as conditioned responses to emotional manipulation. Your family has trained you to equate love with financial support, she explained during our second session. They're activating those triggers intentionally. Maintaining boundaries isn't cruelty, it's necessary self-preservation. 2 weeks after the initial confrontation, the family's approach shifted from emotional manipulation to outright panic as financial reality set in. The mortgage company sent a late payment notice. Credit card companies began calling about missed minimum payments. The luxury car dealership left a message about Tina's BMW being subject to repossession. I documented everything while focusing on rebuilding my own life. I found a modest but comfortable apartment with a proper bedroom and small office. I recovered important personal items from the family home through a police civil standby, an embarrassing but necessary process where officers accompanied me to retrieve my belongings while my family watched sullenly from the living room, refusing to acknowledge me directly. With each passing day, I reclaimed small pieces of myself. I joined a weekend hiking group, rediscovering a passion abandoned years earlier due to work obligations. I had dinner with Ryan and his wife without checking my phone constantly for family emergencies. I even agreed to a coffee date with Emma, a graphic designer from the marketing department who had apparently been dropping hints for months that my exhaustion-fogged brain had missed entirely. For the first time in nearly a decade, I was living my own life rather than funding everyone else's. The guilt remained, appearing in unexpected moments, but it was increasingly outweighed by a growing sense of liberation and rightness. I wasn't abandoning my family. I was refusing to enable harmful patterns that benefited no one in the long term. As Dr. Wilson put it during a particularly difficult session, "You didn't break this family system, Mason. You're simply the first one to stop pretending it isn't broken." The foreclosure notice arrived exactly 3 weeks after I stopped making mortgage payments. I didn't receive it directly, of course, but the family grapevine ensured I knew about it immediately. Dad left a blistering voicemail, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "The bank sent a foreclosure warning today. Is this what you wanted? To see your family homeless? I never thought a son of mine could be so heartless. Your mother can barely get out of bed from crying." I didn't respond, following Dr. Wilson's advice about maintaining communication boundaries. The next day, Mom escalated by appearing at TechSphere's reception area, her eyes red-rimmed and a tissue clutched in her trembling hand. "Mr. Mitchell has a family emergency," the receptionist informed me, looking concerned. Mom launched into her performance the moment I appeared, rushing toward me with a sob. "My blood pressure medication. I can't afford the refill. The doctor says it's dangerous to stop taking it suddenly. Please, Mason, I know you're angry, but this is my health we're talking about." Maintaining composure, I quietly told her, "Mom, your Medicare covers that prescription with a $6 copay. This isn't about medication." Her expression flickered briefly before she doubled down. "There are other expenses too. The house." "I can't discuss this here," I interrupted gently but firmly. "This is my workplace. When can we discuss it? You won't answer calls or texts. It's like you've abandoned us completely." The irony of this statement after they had literally put my belongings in garbage bags wasn't lost on me. "I'll email you," I said, escorting her toward the exit. "Your father was right," she whispered, switching tactics. "Something's changed you. The Mason we raised would never treat his family this way." As difficult as these encounters were, They reinforced the unhealthy dynamics I was trying to escape. My family had become expert emotional manipulators, deploying guilt, shame, and obligation with surgical precision whenever direct control failed. Meanwhile, Tina launched what Ryan called the social media shame campaign. Posts appeared depicting her struggling to make ends meet, while certain family members lived in luxury. She shared childhood photos with captions like, "Remember when family meant something?" and "Blood used to be thicker than money." Mutual acquaintances began messaging me, concerned about the family rift they were hearing about. The most aggressive approach came from Kevin, who progressed from guilt-tripping texts to thinly veiled threats. "You know, Mason, people who abandon their families tend to regret it when they need support later. Karma and all that. Would be a shame if your boss heard about how you treat loved ones. Doubt they'd consider you management material." I forwarded this message to Michael, who added it to the growing file of documentation. "It's not an explicit threat," he advised, "but it establishes a pattern of behavior. Keep recording everything." As uncomfortable as these confrontations were, the family's escalating desperation confirmed what Barbara, Michael, and Dr. Wilson had all suggested for years. I'd been the primary enabler of an unsustainable situation. Without my financial support, the carefully constructed facade was crumbling rapidly. Bank notices continued arriving at the family home. The country club membership was suspended for non-payment. Utility companies sent disconnection warnings. The BMW was indeed repossessed, leading to another round of furious messages from Tina about her humiliation and how I'd ruined her life. 6 weeks after the initial confrontation, the first genuine attempt at reconciliation emerged. Dad called on a Sunday morning, his voice notably lacking the accusatory tone I'd grown accustomed to. "Mason, we need to talk. Not argue. Just talk. As a family. Would you consider meeting us somewhere? Neutral territory. What specifically do you want to discuss?" I asked cautiously. A pause. The situation. The house. Everything. We're struggling, son. It was the first acknowledgement, however oblique, of the financial reality I'd been highlighting for months. After consulting with both Michael and Dr. Wilson, I agreed to meet the family at Riverside Cafe, a restaurant in a public location, with conditions. I would bring my financial advisor, discussions would remain civil, and I would leave immediately if emotional manipulation began. The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday. I spent the intervening days preparing with Barbara, organizing documentation of my contributions and developing sustainable options moving forward. Michael drafted 2 potential agreements depending on the direction of negotiations. Dr. Wilson helped me establish clear emotional boundaries and responses to anticipated pressure tactics. Despite this preparation, my stomach churned with anxiety as I parked outside the cafe. Barbara gave my arm a reassuring squeeze before we exited the car. "Remember, you're not the villain here. You're offering solutions, not ultimatums." The family had already arrived, occupying a corner booth far from other diners. They looked markedly different from when I'd last seen them. Dad had lost weight, Mom's carefully maintained appearance had slipped. Tina's designer outfit had been replaced with simple jeans and a sweater, and Kevin looked positively haggard. The physical manifestation of financial reality had clearly taken its toll. Awkward greetings gave way to uncomfortable silence as Barbara and I settled across from them. Dad cleared his throat, assuming the role of family spokesperson. "Mason first. Thank you for coming. These past weeks have been difficult for everyone." He glanced at Barbara questioningly. "This is Barbara Wells, my financial advisor," I explained. "She's here to help us explore viable options." Dad's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "We've been doing some thinking. And some reassessing of our situation." "We miss you," Mom interjected, emotion evident in her voice. "The house doesn't feel right without you visiting." I maintained a neutral expression, resisting the pull of familial guilt. I appreciate that. But we need to address the financial realities first. Tina sniffled quietly while Kevin stared at the table, uncharacteristically silent. The bank has given us 30 days to become current on the mortgage, Dad continued. Otherwise, foreclosure proceedings begin formally. I nodded. I'm aware of how the process works. We can't make the payments, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. We've tried. Tina applied for retail positions. Kevin's interviewing for sales jobs. I even looked into consulting work. But we can't generate enough income quickly enough to save the house. It was the first time any of them had acknowledged attempting to contribute financially. A small step, but significant. Barbara opened her portfolio, revealing the spreadsheets and documents we'd prepared. Mr. Mitchell has asked me to present 2 potential paths forward. Both addressed the immediate crisis while establishing sustainable long-term arrangements. She outlined the options clearly and concisely. Option A involved selling the house, using the equity to secure more affordable housing for the family, and completely separating our financial entanglements. I would provide a one-time transitional payment to cover 3 months of reasonable expenses, after which all support would cease. Option B allowed the family to remain in the house under strict conditions. I would resume mortgage payments and basic utilities, but would become legal co-owner of the property. All family members would contribute through employment or household management. A detailed budget would be followed with complete transparency, and financial counseling would be mandatory. These are Mason's offers, Barbara concluded. Both are generous given the circumstances, and both require significant changes to previous arrangements. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice subdued. Can we have some time to discuss privately? Barbara and I moved to the counter for coffee while the family huddled in intense conversation. Through the cafe window, I watched spring rain begin to fall. Wondering which path they would choose, or if they would reject both, clinging to untenable expectations. 20 minutes later, Dad signaled us back to the table. Their expressions were solemn but resolute. We want to keep the house, he said simply. We'll accept option B. Beneath the table, my hands trembled with relief and lingering anxiety. This wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning, the first step toward a healthier relationship for all of us. The subsequent negotiations lasted hours as we hammered out specifics. Kevin had already secured an entry-level sales position at an office supply company. Tina had applied to finish her long-abandoned marketing degree while working part-time. Dad agreed to manage household expenses and maintenance in lieu of financial contribution due to his age. Mom would return to substitute teaching 3 days weekly. Each concession came reluctantly, often following spirited debate, but by evening, we had reached an agreement addressing everyone's basic needs while establishing clear boundaries. Barbara drafted the document on her laptop. And we all signed the preliminary agreement, with formal legal documents to follow. As we prepared to leave, Mom caught my arm. We're trying, Mason. It's hard to change after so many years. But we're trying. For the first time in months, her words seemed genuine rather than manipulative. I know, Mom. I'm trying too. The restructuring of our family system had begun. Painful but necessary. Whether it would succeed remained to be seen, but at least now we were acknowledging the dysfunction rather than perpetuating it at the expense of my well-being. It was, I reflected as I drove home, a modest victory, but a victory nonetheless. 6 months have passed since that watershed meeting at Riverside Cafe. The transition hasn't been seamless, change rarely is. Especially when it involves deeply entrenched family dynamics. But the transformation has been remarkable nonetheless. The formal agreement we signed that day became our family constitution of sorts. Michael drafted the legal documents transferring partial ownership of the house to me, protecting my substantial investment, while giving the family security. Barbara created financial management systems with checks and balances to ensure transparency. Dr. Wilson even facilitated several family therapy sessions to address the emotional undercurrents threatening our progress. Kevin surprised everyone by excelling in his sales position. His natural charisma and gift for conversation, previously channeled into elaborate schemes, proved valuable in legitimate business. 3 months in, he received his first commission check and used it to take everyone to dinner, the first time he'd ever financially contributed to a family gathering. "It feels different," he admitted over dessert. "Earning something instead of just talking about potential. Better, actually." Tina's journey has been more complicated. Years of dependency created deep-seated insecurities about her capabilities. The first month of her part-time retail job was rocky, with frequent complaints and threats to quit. But gradually, small successes built her confidence. She's now halfway through completing her marketing degree and has secured an internship for next semester. "I still miss my BMW," she told me recently. "But there's something satisfying about paying for my own car insurance on my Honda." Dad struggled most with the new arrangement. Decades of being the family patriarch made accepting financial oversight difficult for him. Our budget meetings often became tense as he defended purchases or suggested minor adjustments to agreed-upon limits. Several times, I feared the entire arrangement would collapse under the weight of his pride. The turning point came unexpectedly. The community center needed a youth golf instructor, and on impulse, Dad volunteered. Suddenly, his country club experience had purpose beyond status. The modest stipend wasn't significant financially, but the impact on his sense of worth was immeasurable. He now teaches 3 classes weekly, mentoring kids who would otherwise never access the sport. "These kids actually listen to me," he said during a recent family dinner, animated in a way I hadn't seen in years. Rodriguez, this 10-year-old with incredible natural talent, shaved 5 strokes off his game using that grip adjustment I showed him. Mom perhaps adapted most readily, returning to the classroom environment she'd always loved. Her substitute teaching expanded to include tutoring, reconnecting her to the purpose that had defined her early career. The regular routine has improved her health noticeably, both physical and emotional. "I forgot how much I missed the students," she confessed one evening while we were washing dishes together, a simple domestic task that had somehow become a meaningful ritual between us. Having somewhere to be. People who need what I can offer, it matters. Our family gatherings have evolved too. Instead of passive entertainment funded by my credit card, we've discovered simpler pleasures, board game nights that dissolve into laughter, hiking excursions to nearby trails, community events that cost little but create lasting memories. The conversations have deepened, extending beyond complaints and gossip to genuine exchanges of ideas and experiences. The financial restructuring forced other positive changes. Cable television was replaced by a single streaming service, prompting more reading and creative pursuits. Restaurant meals became special occasions rather than daily conveniences, making them more appreciated. The conspicuous consumption that had characterized our family lifestyle gradually gave way to more mindful choices. My own life has undergone equally significant transformation. The modest apartment I rented has become a true home rather than just sleeping quarters between work shifts. I've reduced my working hours to a sustainable 45 weekly, declining the constant overtime that had dominated my existence. My health has improved dramatically, blood pressure normalized, sleep restored, even dropping the 10 pounds of stress weight I'd carried for years. Most surprisingly, my relationship with Emma has blossomed beyond coffee dates to something genuinely promising. She joined our family dinner last Sunday, the first time I'd ever felt comfortable introducing someone to my family, and somehow navigated the complex dynamics with grace and genuine interest. "Your family's actually pretty great," she told me afterward, linking her arm through mine as we walked to her car. "They're trying," I replied, realizing the simple statement applied to everyone, myself included. The financial support I provide now feels like a choice rather than an obligation, a contribution to a family system where everyone participates according to their abilities. The resentment that had poisoned my relationship with money and family has largely dissolved, replaced by appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. This journey has taught me that true support means helping others develop their strengths rather than enabling their weaknesses. It's shown me that love without boundaries isn't love at all, but a hollow imitation that ultimately harms everyone involved. Most importantly, it's revealed that family bonds are strengthened, not weakened, when relationships are built on honesty, respect, and balanced reciprocity. If you're caught in a similar situation, carrying financial or emotional burdens that have become unsustainable, please know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships to flourish. The path isn't easy, and there will be painful moments of doubt and guilt along the way. But the possibility of genuine connection on the other side makes the journey worthwhile. I'd love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle the inevitable guilt and pushback? Your insights might help someone facing these challenges right now. Don't forget to like this video if you found my story valuable, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with anyone who might be struggling with family financial dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, supporting others should never mean surrendering yourself.